And arguably our top story of the day is what's going on with the budget, both here in Michigan and on the federal level. We're joined by our political reporter, Josh Albertus, who, of course, has been keeping tabs on this every step of the way. Josh, today is it. This is the deadline tonight at midnight that we are waiting for both of these budgets to pass. There's implications for both, and yet we don't have a deal for either section at this point.
Yeah, we've been talking about this for months. There is no deal yet. We are still waiting on that. Senate and House lawmakers have been in session all day today as we've been kind of assessing whether or not we were going to get a deal tonight. I mean, whether or not we were going to see a final budget really be put into place. What we are seeing now is that could happen, but it's also possible that we may be seeing something what you usually see on the federal level, what is usually called a continuing resolution, like short-term funding plan to just keep it open for a little while they wrinkle out the details there. And what we are hearing from people like the governor and legislative leaders later tonight was that, it seemed as though that statement that they put out where they were like, the government is going to continue to operate. The government is going to continue essentially to operate normally in these next few days. It seemed like we're not getting a deal tonight. That's entirely speculation, but we have not seen any movement yet. House lawmakers and Senate lawmakers have been in the chamber all day today, but there has been no vote on a final budget, with what we are now seeing is about less than 6 hours left to get a deal, otherwise face a shutdown.
Yeah, and okay, that's the big question for people is shutdown, feels like a scary phrase and term. Things are looking at this point, again, there's hours left in the day, but that's what things are looking like at this point. If we see that happen, I know we've got this resolution, that looks like it likely could go into effect, but what happens tomorrow when folks wake up and, get ready for their day?
That really depends on what we see through the rest of the night. I mean, if there is any sort of continuing resolution, quote unquote, that would be up to lawmakers to decide, okay, are we going to continue funding anything? What are we going to continue funding for the next few days, few weeks? What are we going to do with that? In absence of any sort of deal, if there is no budget, if there is no CR, it's basically up to the administration, to the departments to figure out these contingency plans. I mean, who qualifies as an essential worker, quote unquote, in these situations? Who's going to continue working as we iron out a deal? And Governor Whitmer has kind of hinted at that in the past and said our administration is working on a contingency plan if we have no deal in place. But even there, the details have been very, very scarce. So that's where a lot of the uncertainty up until this point has come from. I mean, especially when you talk about things like schools, things about any other state employee. I mean, are they going to have a job tomorrow? That's really up to the administration and the agencies to decide who is going to be essential, who is going to continue working in the absence of any deal, because I think we need to talk about the magnitude here. You have no budget, you have no funding, period, anywhere. There is no funding going anywhere, and you're just going to, essentially, you would have to assume, people are going to get paid eventually, but we just don't know who is going to be designated where, what kind of deal they're going to make tonight. Right.
Yeah, and of course we are in, the same boat on the federal level. I know you've been keeping, which makes sense, a very close eye here in Michigan. Federally, it's a very similar situation, of course, on a much larger scale. But we were chatting this afternoon that, there's some places like schools, perchance, that rely on a mix of state money and federal money. And if we see one or both of, these situations not find a deal, it's kind of a double whammy for certain sectors of our community.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, at least in recent modern history, that's unprecedented. I mean, we had shutdowns in 07 and 09 here in Michigan, but anywhere else in the 21st century, we have not had a double shutdown on the federal and state level simultaneously here in Michigan. And for those arenas, like you mentioned, like for universities, for example, they get tons of funding from both the state and the federal government. If you cut off both of those simultaneously, and those are kind of in limbo, that's huge.
That's a big
That's
problem.
almost all of their funding. Like, they are not going to be able to know what they're working with for a vast majority of what they rely on. I mean, we've already seen it to a certain extent on the state level, where you talk about K through 12 schools, and they're talking about, universal school meals, for example. They're talking about, we don't know what the future of that is going to be until you folks in Lansing pass a budget. So we're having to figure out our numbers, but essentially they were having to guess as to what that was going to be. Imagine taking that on both the state level, as they've been talking about, universal breakfasts and lunches, year by year state thing. And compounding that with federal, not knowing what they're getting from federal either, that's huge. And there's really not really a good way to describe it just because it is so unprecedented in modern history. We really don't know what that would mean in its entirety because it just doesn't happen.
And so as far as, we're approaching 7 o'clock, we've got, just over 5 hours left in the day, before this, overnight sort of deadline hits us. Does that continuing resolution, does that need to be figured out before that midnight deadline? Could that happen overnight into the morning, or is it just kind of unknown at this point?
If they were to pursue any kind of, paraphrasing, continuing resolution kind of thing, I mean, in essence, yes, you do still need to pass it by that same deadline because the whole thing is state funding as a whole at midnight tonight, it's gone, all of it together. So even if you are looking to pursue a different route like short-term funding,
it needs to happen.
It needs to happen by the same deadline or else there's nothing there. They still have the gap no matter what. And even that can have consequences. I mean, especially for, agencies who work 9 to 5. I mean, you're going to have to tell your employees what are they going to do in the morning.
Are you coming into work or not?
Right, right. So it's been signaled through that release from legislative leaders that government will continue to operate, but really the details are fuzzy at this point, really fuzzy, because without any funding whatsoever in the form of a CR, in the form of a budget, there's zip, it's nothing.
Well, if there's anyone who's going to keep us closely informed as we kind of tick down the minutes tonight, it's going to be Josh. So we know that you're going to continue to follow this, work a shift and a half for us today to continue to have this covered. So any updates that Josh is able to get for us, we'll of course let you know. Josh, thank you for simplifying this for us and talking us through it. Really appreciate it. We're going to take